The World Tourism Organization defines tourism as the activity of visitors in a place other than the place of habitual residence, and promotes tourism as a driver for economic growth and inclusive development. Certainly, the tourism industry has proven to be a significant player in global economy. As of today, it is the world's third largest export category. It accounts for over 10% of the global gross domestic product and is related to 1 in 10 jobs. Last year alone, 1,326 million international tourist arrivals were recorded, and over $1,340 billion were earned in tourist receipts, about $3 billion per day. In 2017, there were 210.9 million international tourist arrivals in the Americas. This figure represents a market share of 16%. According to the World Tourism Organization, North America accounts for 2/3 of the region's international arrivals and receipts. Still, there was growth in both figures in South America. However, while some countries such as Chile and Colombia registered double-digit growth in their international tourist arrivals in 2017, Venezuela's figures are not even available. Still, we can compare how our country's tourist arrivals and receipts hold up to those of other countries in the region using data from 2016. That year, Venezuela was visited by 600,000 tourists, while Argentina and Brazil were visited by over 6 million tourists each. That same year, international tourist receipts for Venezuela were $473 million, while those of Brazil were over $6 billion. It is noteworthy that the figures for 2016 represent a change of almost -50% compared to the previous year. As these figures demonstrate, the tourism industry in our country is free-falling. While tourism accounts for 10% of the world's gross domestic product, it only accounts for 3% of Venezuela's gross domestic product. And while the tourism industry is responsible for 10% of the world's employment, it only generates 2.6% of the jobs in Venezuela. Currently, Venezuela occupies the 104th overall position in the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report, but ranks even lower in certain indicators, such as safety and security and business environment. In fact, according to the 2017 Doing Business World Ranking, Venezuela is currently the third hardest economy to start a business in. This indicates that the regulatory conditions in our country make it extremely difficult to start and run a business, as investors must deal with a lot of costly, time-consuming procedures to start their business and do not receive much legal protection for their investment. However, not all is bad news for tourism in Venezuela. According to the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report, Venezuela ranks favorably in natural resources, price competitiveness, and cultural resources and business travel. Therefore, to stimulate the development of the travel and tourism sector, we could exploit these favorable indicators to attract investors. The development of the tourism industry in our country will be beneficial to the national economy, given that increased inbound tourism expenditure generates employment, promotes the improvement of services and infrastructure, and stimulates the local economy through the multiplier effect and causes it to diversify. The stimulation of other sectors of business can reduce import leakages, which is beneficial to the country's balance of payments. About the multiplier effect in tourism, we can say that it is related to how many times income from tourism circulates through an economy. It implies that the tourism industry affects the economy both directly and indirectly, as it creates jobs not only in the tertiary sector of industry services, but also in the primary sector, extraction of raw materials, and secondary sector, manufacturing. For example, money spent by tourists in a hotel does not only support jobs in that hotel, but also the hotel, service suppliers, the local farmers to whom the hotel buys food, and the industries that manufacture the souvenirs that the hotel sells under gift shop, among others. This multiplier effect continues until the revenue generated by tourism leaks from the national economy to another through imports. According to a recent study, tourism leakage in the Caribbean reaches 80%. In other words, 80% of all tourism expenditure in the Caribbean countries ends up leaving their economies through foreign-owned businesses such as tour operators, airlines, and hotels, and imported goods. Therefore, Caribbean countries profit much less from tourism activity than other countries where there is less leakage. As mentioned earlier, the multiplier effect can help to reduce this leakage phenomenon, which is beneficial to the country's balance of payments. The balance of payments is an accounting record that reflects a country's inflows and outflows of money. When the value of exports exceeds that of imports, it is said that a country has a trade surplus. The opposite is called a trade deficit. International tourism affects the balance of payments as an export of a service to non-residents. The balance of payments is useful to measure the strength of a country's economy against that of other countries. In some cases, the balance of payments is related to a country's political stability, because instability tends to drive away foreign investors. In Venezuela, for example, there is a large trade deficit, as our country imports more goods and services than those that it exports, and there is not enough foreign investment to counter that effect due to the lack of political stability in our country, which, as I said before, drives away investors. Therefore, our economy could be considered weak in relation to other countries. How do we strengthen it? Well, a good idea could be to prioritize tourism and facilitate the foreign inversions that could fuel its development. After all, tourism is, as the World Tourism Organization claims, a driver of economic growth, which has strong positive impacts in the economies of host countries.